Chapter 1: The Stolen Dagger. The early morning haze still clung to the lower reaches of the towering skyscrapers as Detective Samantha Trapanetti, known as Trap to her colleagues, strode confidently into the crime scene. The chill of the October air in downtown NYC seemed to seep through her black wool peacoat, yet she barely noticed, her focus entirely on the scene before her. The body lay crumpled in an alley off 14th Street, a grim canvas in the pale light. The victim was male, mid-30s, a dagger missing from his chest, a detail that the forensic analyst was quick to point out upon her arrival. "Looks like our killer wanted a souvenir," muttered Trap, eyeing the empty sheath on the belt of the deceased. As the forensics team busied themselves around her, Trap's gaze drifted to the walls of the alley, where an array of cryptic symbols had been spray-painted in a chaotic, almost frenzied manner. They were symbols she didn't recognize, patterns that hinted at something darker, something she couldn't quite place. Just as she was about to take photos of the graffiti, her phone vibrated. A text from the precinct indicated another incident, possibly related, at a nearby location. With a resigned sigh, she headed to the second scene, the day promising more questions than answers. At the second crime scene, the stolen dagger had found its way into another victim's chest, this one in a bustling marketplace. The chaos of the environment contrasted sharply with the grim silence of the alleyway. As Trap navigated through the crowd, her sharp eyes caught a fleeting glimpse of panic on a bystander's face. He was an oddly dressed man, whose style seemed out of sync with the urban surroundings. Approaching cautiously, Trap introduced herself. The man, nervously twisting a silver ring on his finger, claimed ignorance, but was clearly holding back. Before she could press further, he excused himself, mumbling about needing to leave. Trap's instincts screamed that there was more to his story, but she had to pivot as her radio crackled to life, demanding her attention elsewhere. The day ended back at the precinct, poring over the evidence. The mysterious symbols at both crime scenes were now confirmed to be magical sigils, though their exact purpose and origin remained elusive. It was clear that this case delved into realms that Trap wasn't familiar with, realms she wasn't sure she wanted to enter. As the clock ticked past midnight, Trap sat in her office, the dim light. As the clock ticked past midnight, Trap sat in her office, the dim light casting long shadows. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. It was the odd man from the market, looking even more disheveled than before. "I think you should know what you're dealing with," he said, stepping into the light. His eyes were earnest, haunted. Those symbols, they're not just graffiti. They're a call to something ancient, something powerful. And so, under the flickering fluorescent lights, Christian McAfee, known as Mackie, began to unveil the hidden world of magic that Trap had unknowingly stepped into. Chapter 2: The Sigil and the Suspect. The following morning, Trap and Mackie convened in the cramped confines of Captain Reynolds' office. Reynolds, a grizzled veteran with a no-nonsense attitude, was skeptical of Mackie's claims, but allowed him to continue under Trap's watchful eye. As Mackie laid out his knowledge of the occult, Trap found herself reluctantly fascinated. He spoke of traditions that traced back centuries, of magical practices that influenced everything from mundane daily rituals to powerful ceremonial magics. The sigils, he explained, were protective wards that had been corrupted, possibly to mask the darker intent of the rituals now occurring in the city. With a newfound, albeit cautious, partnership, Trap and Mackie delved deeper into the investigation. They traced the origins of the Sigil through dusty tomes and digital archives, finding connections to ancient texts that spoke of summoning and binding rituals. Their search led them to an occult bookshop, a cramped space filled with the musty scent of old paper and the sharp tang of incense. The shop owner was evasive, dismissing their questions with practiced ease. However, as they turned to leave, Mackie's sharp eyes caught a glimpse of a familiar pattern on a hidden shelf. A book, its cover emblazoned with the very sigil they were investigating. The discovery was a breakthrough, but it also painted a target on their backs. As they left the shop, the sense of being watched grew stronger. Their investigation was stirring up interest, not all of it friendly. That evening, as Trap reviewed the day's findings, her phone buzzed. It was Mackie, his voice urgent. "Meet me at Penn Station," he said. "There's something you need to see." Under the harsh lights of the busy station, Mackie handed her a folded piece of paper. It was a photocopy of a page from the book they had found, detailing a ritual that eerily mirrored the circumstances of the murders. "It's more than just a hobby for someone," Mackie murmured, looking around nervously. "It's a mission." As they parted ways, Trap felt the weight of the case settling around her. The magical was no longer mythical. It was real, and it was deadly. And now, she was in the center of it all, with Mackie as her unlikely guide into the shadows of a world she never knew existed. Chapter 3. The Ritual Unfolds. Detective Samantha Trapp couldn't shake off the unsettling feeling as she navigated her way back to the precinct. The city's nocturnal pulse seemed to thrum with a foreboding rhythm, syncing with her own heightened anxieties. The revelation at Penn Station had shifted something fundamental in her understanding of the case, and she couldn't unsee the shadows that now danced in the corners of her world. Back at her desk, she spread out the photocopy Mackie had given her. The text was dense, arcane, filled with references to celestial alignments and blood offerings. It painted a disturbing picture, suggesting that the murders might be part of a larger, more sinister ritual, one that was not yet complete. Her phone rang, cutting through the silence of the office. It was Reynolds, asking her to come to his office. With a sigh, she gathered the papers and headed to meet her captain. "You're looking into this magic stuff pretty deep," Reynolds remarked as she entered, his tone mixed with concern and skepticism. "What's got you convinced there's something to it?" Trapp laid the photocopy on his desk. "This isn't just graffiti or some cult messing around, Captain. The details in this book, they match up too closely with what we've seen at the crime scenes. We might be looking at a serial killer using ritual magic as an MO." Reynolds rubbed his chin, eyes scanning the document. "All right, Trapp. I'm not sold on this magic angle, but you have a knack for sniffing out the truth. Take Mackie with you and follow this lead, but be careful. I don't want this blowing up in our faces." Trapp nodded, feeling a mix of validation and apprehension. As she left the office, she texted Mackie to meet her first thing in the morning. They had work to do. Chapter 4. Symbols and Shadows. The next day dawned with a grim gray sky, mirroring the mood of the city. Trapp met Mackie outside an old library that housed one of the largest collections of esoteric books in the state. If they were going to understand the ritual and who might be behind it, they needed more information. Inside, the library was a labyrinth of tall, dusty shelves, the air thick with the musty scent of aging paper. Mackie led the way to the restricted section, where texts on the occult were kept under lock and key. As they pored over ancient manuscripts and modern interpretations of magical practices, Trap found herself drawn into a world she had never believed in. One where magic was not just real, but powerful and dangerous. She took notes, her detective's mind piecing together the fragments of a puzzle that was as mystifying as it was horrifying. Mackie pulled out a particularly old tome, its cover cracked and pages yellowed with age. "This one talks about the Sigil of Amara," he said, pointing to a symbol that closely resembled the one from the crime scenes. "It's supposed to grant protection from death, but in the wrong hands, it could be used to harness life force, extending one's life by taking another's." Trap felt a chill run down her spine. The implications were monstrous. Could someone really believe in this enough to kill for it? Their research was interrupted by a call from the precinct. Another body had been found, this one with the sigil carved directly into the skin. The urgency was palpable. They arrived at the new crime scene to find it cordoned off, with officers moving grimly about their duties. Trap stepped under the tape, her eyes immediately drawn to the gruesome sigil on the victim's chest. It was precise, intentional, and more elaborate than the previous ones. Mackie, pale-faced, whispered beside her, "This is escalating. Whoever is doing this is getting bolder, or maybe closer to whatever they're trying to achieve." Trap photographed the sigil, her mind racing. She needed to connect the dots to prevent another death. As they left the scene, she glanced at Mackie, seeing in him not just a consultant, but a vital ally in this strange, shadowy fight. Together, they returned to the library, the weight of their grim discovery urging them to delve deeper into the night, searching for answers among the whispers of ancient pages. The city's underbelly was revealing itself to them, a world where the line between life and magic was terrifyingly thin. Chapter 5. Gathering Storm. As the city's muted sounds filtered through the library's thick walls, Detective Trap and Mackie huddled over an array of open books, their table a mosaic of ancient scripts and arcane illustrations. The dim light from the desk lamp cast long shadows, giving the room an almost spectral atmosphere. Mackie's fingers traced the lines of a particularly old text as Trap cross-referenced the sigils with police records, looking for any patterns or similar occurrences in the city's troubled past. "The Sigil of Amara isn't just protective. It's a beacon," Mackie muttered, his voice low. "It's used to draw energies, to focus them for a purpose. This isn't just about extending life. It's about power, about controlling something unseen." Trap's eyes narrowed as she processed the information. "So, our killer might be trying to summon or control something. What? A spirit? A force?" "Exactly," Mackie replied. "And each murder adds to their power, brings them closer to their goal." The realization hung heavy between them. The stakes were higher than either had anticipated. With a new sense of urgency, Trap gathered her notes and stood. "We need to warn the department. Get more protection out there. If this is building to something, we need to stop it before it's complete." Chapter 6. A break in the clouds. Returning to the precinct, Trapp presented her findings to Captain Reynolds and a room full of skeptical detectives. Charts, crime scene photos, and excerpts from the occult texts covered the walls. The atmosphere was tense, disbelief mixed with a growing concern as Trapp outlined the connections between the murders and the sigil of Amara. This isn't just serial killing, it's ritualistic. Someone is using these murders to fuel some kind of magical rite, Trapp explained, pointing to the patterns of the sigils and their locations across the city map. Each point forms part of a larger sigil, an enormous circle of power being constructed right under our noses. Reynolds, his brow furrowed, finally nodded. All right, Trapp, what do you need? Surveillance on key points, protection details for potential targets, especially those involved in the occult community, and a task force to track any related activities or disturbances, she replied, her voice firm. Granted the resources she requested, Trapp coordinated with Mackie to identify the most likely next targets and locations. As the department mobilized, the city seemed to hold its breath, the tension palpable in the damp evening air. Later that night, as Trapp and Mackie patrolled one of the identified hotspots, an urgent call came through on the radio. A disturbance at a local cemetery, one directly in line with the points of the burgeoning citywide sigil. They arrived to find a scene of chaos. A group of robed figures had been caught performing a ritual by an undercover unit. As Trapp and Mackie approached, the air seemed charged with a strange energy, the hair on their arms standing on end. In the ensuing confrontation, Mackie's knowledge proved invaluable. He shouted warnings and instructions to the officers, helping them disrupt the ritual without causing harm. Several suspects were detained, their robes adorned with the sigil of Amara. In the precinct's interrogation room, the leader of the group, a gaunt man with piercing eyes, finally broke under persistent questioning. He spoke of a master who was orchestrating the rituals to open a gateway, to bring forth something he only referred to as the Ascendant. Trapp and Mackie exchanged a glance, the weight of their discovery settling in. They had stopped one ritual, but the mastermind was still out there, likely planning the final steps of their grand design. As dawn broke over the city, the first clear day in weeks, Trapp stood at her office window, looking out over the skyline. The city was safe for now, but the true battle lay ahead. With Mackie by her side, she felt a cautious optimism. Together, they had faced the unknown and emerged stronger. We'll find him, Mackie assured her, his voice steady. We'll stop this before it's too late. Trapp nodded, her resolve firm. We will. We have to. The city depended on it, and she was not about to let this shadowy threat engulf the place she called home. As the new day's light washed over her, Samantha Trapp felt the weight of responsibility and the thrill of the hunt. This was her city, and she would protect it, no matter the cost. Chapter 7. The Master's Move. As the city awakened, bustling with the early stirrings of morning traffic and pedestrians, Detective Trapp and Mackie reconvened in the precinct's war room, where maps and photos spread across every surface testified to the night's events. The room hummed with the low murmur of officers discussing leads and strategy, but a heavy sense of anticipation hung in the air. The suspects we detained aren't talking much beyond what we heard last night, Trapp reported to Captain Reynolds, who listened intently, his seasoned eyes scanning the documents before him. They're loyal, scared, or both. But they all fear this master more than they fear us. Reynolds nodded gravely. That means this master is still out there, and likely knows we're onto him now. We need to anticipate his next move. Trap and Mackie spent the morning combing through the suspect's belongings and the artifacts recovered from the disrupted ritual. Among the items, Mackie found a heavily annotated book that contained references to an ancient prophecy about the Ascendant, a powerful entity believed to bridge the natural and supernatural worlds. This could be what he's after, Mackie pointed out, showing Trap a passage in the book. If he believes he can summon or become the Ascendant, he might attempt something drastic to complete the ritual. They decided to increase surveillance and protective measures around other known occult locations and practitioners in the city. Mackie suggested reaching out to the broader magical community for assistance, a network of informants who might be willing to help prevent their practices from being further corrupted. Chapter 8. Allies in the Shadows. By midday, Trap and Mackie met with a small group of trusted practitioners in a nondescript cafe downtown. These individuals, leaders within their respective magical traditions, expressed their concern and offered their support, sharing insights into possible locations and times the master might use to harness the necessary cosmic alignments. We're dealing with someone who's gone far beyond the pale, one elder practitioner said, her eyes troubled. This isn't just about power. It's about altering reality. If he summons the Ascendant, there's no telling what havoc it could wreak. Equipped with new information, Trap and Mackie formulated a plan to intercept the master before he could complete his ritual. They divided the city into sectors, assigning teams to watch over key ley line intersections predicted to be used in the final ritual. As the day turned into evening, tension escalated with reports of unusual activities in several sectors. Trap and Mackie, along with a tactical unit, mobilized towards the most likely site for the ritual, a forgotten mausoleum in the heart of the city's oldest cemetery. Chapter 9. Confrontation at the mausoleum. The mausoleum stood silent and imposing against the twilight sky as Trap, Mackie, and their team approached cautiously. The air was thick with a palpable sense of foreboding, the silence punctuated only by their quiet footsteps and the distant hum of the city. Inside, they found the master, a charismatic, menacing figure cloaked in dark robes, his face an eerie mask of calm. He was alone, standing within a complex circle of symbols and candles, his hands raised as if in the midst of incantation. "Stop! Police!" Trap commanded, her team fanning out around her, weapons trained on the figure. But the master merely smiled, his eyes glinting with madness, or was it power? "You are too late, detective," he intoned, his voice echoing strangely in the chamber. "The Ascendant will rise, and through me will reshape this world." As he resumed his chant, the air around them seemed to shimmer, the boundaries between reality and something else blurring. Mackie shouted warning, diving towards Trap as the symbols on the ground began to glow ominously. Chapter 10. The Ascendant's Arrival. A brilliant flash of light erupted, blinding everyone momentarily. When it subsided, the master was no longer human, but something other. His form twisted and enlarged, shadows swirling around him like dark smoke. Despite the shock, Trap rallied her team, signaling them to hold their positions. "Mackie, the book. How do we stop this?" Mackie, scrambling to recall the rituals he'd studied, directed the officers to disrupt the sigils by smearing them, breaking the geometric perfection needed to maintain the portal. As they acted, the master's form flickered, his howls of rage filling the air. With one final concerted effort, Trap and Mackie led the charge, physically disrupting the ritual setup. The master, caught in the backlash of his own summoned energies, screamed as the power he had called forth consumed him in spectral fire. As the light died down, the master was gone, leaving behind only scorched earth where he had stood. The threat was neutralized, but the night was far from over. Chapter 11, Aftermath. As the adrenaline of the confrontation ebbed away, Detective Trap and Mackie surveyed the mausoleum, now eerily quiet, except for the low murmurs of the officers securing the area. The threat had been neutralized, but the cost and the chaos left behind were palpable. Captain Reynolds arrived soon after, his expression a mix of relief and concern as he took in the scene. "Good work, Trap," Reynolds said, clapping her on the shoulder. "But this," he gestured to the remnants of the ritual circle, "this is going to need a lot of explaining." Trap nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. "We'll need to debrief fully, figure out how to cover this. The public can't know the full extent of what happened here." Mackie, looking over the damaged sigils and scattered ritual components, added, "There's going to be fallout in the magical community too. Trust has been broken. It'll take time to heal." In the days that followed, the precinct worked tirelessly. Detectives and officers were debriefed. Reports were sanitized for public consumption, and the official story was pared down to an extremist cult disrupted before completing a terrorist act. Mackie worked with the occult practitioners to reassure and stabilize the network, repairing the rifts that the events had caused. Chapter 12, Reflections. Weeks passed, and life in NYC slowly returned to its usual rhythm. Trap spent her days following up on lesser cases, but the shadows of the mausoleum incident lingered in her mind. She often found herself at her desk late into the evening, reviewing files from the case, searching for any signs they might have missed something. One such evening, Mackie stopped by her office with a couple of coffees. "You're burning the midnight oil again, Sam," he noted, setting the coffee down. Trap smiled tiredly. "Just making sure there are no loose ends." Mackie leaned against her desk, sipping his coffee. "You know, there's always going to be things we don't fully understand. Powers and forces at the edge of our perception. But we did good, Trap. We stopped something terrible." Trap nodded, accepting the coffee. "I know. It's just, sometimes I wonder what else is out there, what other mysteries are hidden in plain sight. That's the life of a detective, isn't it? Always searching for the truth." Mackie chuckled. "And you've got me to help with the weird stuff." They shared a moment of comfortable silence, sipping their coffees and looking out over the city lights. Chapter 13, A New Dawn. The peace was short-lived. A few weeks later, new reports started trickling in. Strange occurrences, minor but mysterious. People reported seeing shadows moving independently, odd whispers in deserted alleys, and an inexplicable chill that settled over certain parts of the city. Trap and Mackie were back on the case, their partnership strengthened by their previous trials. They dove into this new mystery with a renewed sense of purpose. Whatever was happening, they were ready to face it, drawing on both their police training, and Mackie's occult knowledge. As they stood together looking over the city from the precinct's rooftop one chilly evening, Trap felt a sense of anticipation mixed with the familiar thrill of the hunt. "We've got our work cut out for us, Mackie," she said, watching the city pulse below them. Mackie grinned, pulling his collar up against the wind. "Let the natural forces come. We'll be ready for them." Together, they turned back to the task at hand, ready to unravel the new mysteries that awaited them. Guardians of a city that never truly slept, its secrets as deep and enduring as the stars above. In the dance of light and shadow, Samantha Trap and Christian Mackie found their calling, a duo balanced between the mundane and the magical, forever chasing the elusive truth hidden within the heart of the metropolis.